So a little background on me. I've been working in tech for over the last 20 years. I graduated from Stanford in engineering. It was called industrial engineering at the time. Now it's working in software without working with some bank. And it was very clear in that time when I was working with the banks that there was something broken. And so I worked with organizations like Swift. I worked at a company called Informatica where we were moving a lot of data around. And moving that data around was so that these banks could reconcile all these transactions. And so when I finally understood how the blockchain worked, I was like, yeah, you don't have to move that data around anymore, because when you publish a transaction, when that transaction is confirmed, all of the different ledgers, all the different distributed nodes have the same information. So you don't need to move money around. I mean, you don't have to move that data around. And it's a lot more secure. And this blockchain space to get into cryptocurrencies as well. And it was through BlockCypher, and this is a partial list of our customer base that I've had the privilege of working with some of the largest organizations in the world, like the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Department of Energy, Deloitte, and others, as well as some of the smallest companies, smallest startups, you know, 1-person, 2-person companies, and some of which have become very large companies like Coinbase. And it was fun. Last night I was talking to Live about Abra. I was at the Bitcoin meetup last night and saw how Abra has shifted their trajectory, but it's fun to see how startups have figured out the landscape, how people want to use cryptocurrencies or blockchains, and really evolved. So BlockCypher, though, is middleware. So that's why companies like Abra, Coinbase, a number of exchanges, as well as some of the largest organizations like the Department of Energy will use us, because they want to connect to the blockchains. But there's so many different blockchains, and those blockchains are really different, changing really quickly. And it's just a mess in terms of keeping up with all of the changes that need to be made, and also the infrastructure maintenance that's required. So that's why they go through us. So we're like Amazon Web Services for blockchains. We make it really easy for developers, for companies to start up and just really quickly get using the blockchain, get started on blockchains without having to build up that infrastructure. And so last year, you know, Gartner, if anybody's worked in this space for a long time, you know, Gartner puts a lot of reports and Magic Quadrants. Now, there isn't a Magic Quadrant yet for blockchains, but they did put out 2 reports on cool vendors in blockchain applications and blockchain platforms. So we were named as a cool vendor in blockchain platform, which was very interesting and good to see. So just to level set, for those of you who don't have a background in blockchains, I'm just going to do a really quick overview of why the blockchain is so special, why all the hype. So first of all, if we just look at traditional security for databases, you have a central database, you know, in the middle there, everybody, or you have a central structure, like a banking system, where everybody goes to a central, you know, sort of authority. The problem with that is now you are at risk, great risk of coming under attack. So I don't know if any of you have been affected by the Equifax hack. I was, and a number of others where, you know, my information was stolen because a hacker was able to get into the centralized database because they figured out all the nuances of the database and get the information out. Now with the blockchain, the difference is now those databases, you know, basically the ledgers, the containers of this information, right, are distributed. So if you want to add data to the blockchain, you want to add data to this distributed database, you have to add it to all of these systems at the same time. And if a hacker wants to get it in, they have to somehow break in to all these systems at the same time, which is very difficult because all these systems are different, right? They're completely different in structure. And that makes it extremely challenging, if not impossible, for any hacker to do. So when you look at security, one big reason why people want to use blockchains for that security. The second is decentralized transactions. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier on how you no longer need an intermediary. You no longer need that bank in between that's taking fees away from you, or every number of, every 10 banks, coming in and taking fees from you. So you have much lower costs and you have much faster settlement. And so if you look at today, when you send a payment to traditional routes from here to, say, Nigeria, it's actually going to many different places before the payment actually gets to Nigeria. It's going to Canada, and maybe from Canada, it's going to, Canada has a banking relationship with London, and London has a banking relationship with Dubai. Dubai has a banking relationship with some bank in Brazil. And finally, it gets to Nigeria. So each one of those hops in terms of getting the money across means someone's taking a cut, and that gets expensive over time. So with the blockchain, because these transactions are decentralized, you cut through all that. You don't need to go to all those different people, have all those intermediaries take those cuts, so it's faster, and you have a much lower cost of transmitting those transactions. And the second is transparency. So that means now, instead of having to send spreadsheets around or having databases that have to be synchronized, or what I was doing in Informatica, which was pushing data around, you don't have to do that anymore, because all that data is now, when it's added to the blockchain, everybody sees it at the same time. And the third reason we talked about, which is that security, that ability to reduce fraud and become resilient, attack resilient. So I just want to switch gears here. I want to pause for a second. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to crypto examples? Okay. So to just talk about crypto for payments, this is really exciting to me, because every year, every few months actually, I see a new, and I help, in some cases where I'm lucky, I help a company add blockchain liquidity, for lack of a better word, which means they can now use a number of different means to transact and use the blockchain for payment. So we just helped a company called TechCent integrate with 4 different currencies: Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, Ether, and Dash. And they have a debit card that people can use to top off in cryptocurrencies and then use anywhere. They also have a hybrid, it's really called a hybrid wallet, which means they also have a mobile wallet that you can use and transact in crypto anywhere in the world. And so they support 35 million merchants. They're growing rapidly, and it's a really good example of how, especially if you are someone dealing with cross-border transactions, or you are a company that does a lot of cross-border trading of some kind, this is a really good application, because you aren't dealing with all the fees like I was talking about just a few minutes ago. And so the other example is gift cards, and there have been a number of gift cards that have come out over the last few years. Purse is actually one that's been around for quite a while now. With Purse, you can buy, on Amazon, and use Bitcoin to buy on Amazon. And each time you do, you save 15%. And so, I kid you not, I have a friend who says, yeah, this is what I do. I buy my groceries through Amazon, and I save 15% every time on top of it, because, she has been a Bitcoin holder. She's, done well, so that, she's doing really well with the groceries and other things. But I mean, it's kind of funny, but yes, people do use Bitcoin, and they do use cryptocurrency in their daily lives because it's cheaper. It makes sense. And then we've worked with a number of larger companies, credit card companies, who are looking to use, or have been using, the blockchain for things like loyalty management, and basically making it easier for their partners to reconcile, payments. And so this is a good example of how, with the blockchain, some of these traditional ways of doing things, like rewards management, whether it's for employees or loyalty management for their end customers, the blockchain makes things a lot faster, more secure, and you get these features like being able to do peer-to-peer payments, which isn't really easy. So I don't know about you, but I have a lot of rewards programs that I'm involved in, and most of them I don't use at all because they're just so cumbersome and difficult. And I don't know if they mean to make it that way, but sometimes I think it's because they have this centralized database that everything goes back up to, and everything takes forever. Anytime I want to change points, shift them from one person to another, one account to another, it just takes months. Whereas using the blockchain, it's instantaneous. So there's credit card companies, and a lot of companies in general are looking to use the blockchain for loyalty management because it makes their products and makes their services a lot stickier. And when you make it easier for people to trade points, to trade basically virtual cash, then their solutions become more widely adopted, and people want to go back and use it. There's an incentive for people to use it. And the last example I have for using crypto and blockchain in different applications is mobile recharge and money accounts. So this goes back to some of what we were talking before, for people who are traveling around the world, or for people who do any kind of cross-border business. These kinds of solutions make it easier for them. So I had a colleague, actually a partner, who was moving from Spain to Switzerland. And so in that process, he had a phone, a prepaid phone. And he's like, great, now I can use Bitrefill, Pico, to top off my phone while I'm in Spain and use it when I'm in Switzerland. And I don't have to worry about currency conversions because, or anything like that, or it wasn't even Spain or Switzerland, I think it was like Dubai or Switzerland. And I don't worry about currency conversions or anything like that because I just use the cryptocurrency. And it was wonderful. And then we have other clients like the Pesa who are in Nigeria and other parts of Africa where they have customers. So if there's companies in the US that pay people in Nigeria for their services, for work that they're doing for these companies. And rather than pay the obscene rates, through Western Union or something else, they're able to use Bitcoin as the underlying rails for the transaction and save a ton on those fees. Plus, it's a lot faster to send money from US or Europe to Nigeria. We're also working with another company that's helping refugees get work within their countries. They're basically freelancers, but in particular, they're helping refugees get paid for services like taking surveys, doing translation, what they call microcasts. And again, for these kinds of employees, it takes months to build up like a $300 sort of payment, right? It's because each of these tasks only costs 5 cents or $5 at the most. So before with this company, they were using Western Union, and they had to wait until it was $300, which could be months, and before paying these workers. And now they're able to pay much faster. That's the idea with using the cryptocurrency as everyone does. So with going back to what we can help you with at BlockCypher, you can start sending these transactions using the blockchain, using cryptocurrencies in your business today. And so that's what I wanted to show you next. So if you were to come to our website, you just hit the sign in or register link. You come in, you sign in, and you get a token. And once you get that token, you're ready to start using your APIs. So we have a free tier. So that means you have a number of API calls you can make a day. So think of this like as a data plan. A fixed set of API calls you can make a day, and then as your business grows and increasingly uses cryptocurrencies or blockchain transactions, you pay more, but you only pay as you need it. So that is something that our customers like because it helps them scale, but they only scale as they need to. So we have a number of web services. What I'm going to show you today is the most basic one, which is our transaction API. It's really powerful because using that, you don't have to set up your own client for, say, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dash, Dogecoin, whatever. You just use our APIs. And it only takes less than an hour to figure this out and start using it. Actually, I will show you how to do it within 30 seconds to a minute. And then you're able to scale using our infrastructure, so you don't have to worry about waking up in the middle of the night when your Ethereum node goes down because there was a hard fork. And with all these blockchains, there are a lot of changes, and it just, you need somebody else oftentimes to take that pain away from you, so you can focus on really the hard stuff, which is building your application. So we think of this as really no different than the way people have outsourced a lot of what they're doing to the cloud and to Amazon Web Services. So, so just to summarize, BlockCypher supports private to public chains. We support these for major chains plus Dogecoin, the public chains that you see up there. And so what I wanted to just show you now is really quickly how that works, and then I'll come back to this interoperability. So, okay, so the first thing is you can, in our environment, you can use BlockCypher to create, to test in a test application environment for Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Dogecoin. So we have one testing environment for that. And then we have another test environment for Ethereum, because that's very different. The great thing about testing is you don't have to waste your precious coins then while you're building your application. You can make up stuff, and I'll show you how right here. So in this example, I'm using the Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin Dash test environment, which is called BCY. And I can, to create a transaction, I need to have two addresses, right? So I have an address, and I'm going to send my, 10,000 Bitcoins.
Great.
Yeah. You'll be rich.
Thanks.
And so, so I create an address for her, I create an address for myself, right? And then I can fund these addresses using a faucet. So, so I'm just going to show you here. I have, I'm going to fund. I'm just going to show you. Actually, I've created the addresses. So I'm going to fund one of these. These addresses here, and it'll end up with this. Can you guys see that? Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. And then so this is the transaction hash.
Yep.
That's the result. And then, just to show you how this works, we can go to BlockCypher. BlockCypher's Block Explorer page. So this is open source. All these different testing environments as well as coins. So, so you can see there's Litecoin, Dogecoin, Dash, Bitcoin. I'm going to go to the BlockCypher testnet, which is BCY, and then you'll be able to see this transaction, which was me using the faucet to fund. So sorry, actually, I didn't put that much money in, but we'll just add a few zeros next time. And what you can see are some interesting things here, like, okay, there's these confirmations. 1 on 6 right now. You can see the detail around what's been consumed, what outputs have been created, and there's also advanced details that you can get just a lot. Okay, so just a lot of information about the transaction, and that's available. And then when it's confirmed, you'll see that there's confirmations there. There's plenty of information. But now, okay, so we created the address, we funded that address, right, using our faucet. And now let's create the transaction. So now I'm actually doing the faucet. I'm going to send money to you. Okay, so I use this curl command, and so that will send it to a JSON file. And I just put it in a JSON file so that it's easier to read. And so you can see here's the JSON file. Okay, now here is, I can use my private key, which I only have to sign that transaction. So to do that, I will use a signer I have. So I'm going to sign this transaction. Now I'm going to sign it with my private key, which is this. And then I get this return. And now what I need to do is add the signature to the public keys transaction to complete everything. So I will do that. And what you'll see is, okay, I've signed that. Now I have to add the appropriate signature. Oops. Okay. So, okay. Okay. So now I can save this. I can also, check that the JSON's correct. This is just for fun.
Is it through the BlockCypher token that gives this value? And like, is it a BlockCypher token that is converting to Bitcoin that's allowing this whole thing to happen? Or is this all just kind of like?
Oh, this is all just happening.
Okay.
Without, and so we're not. It's not. We're not. We're the technology that enables the transaction. So
right.
the transaction for you.
Right.
And this way, the powerful thing is now you can use any wallet. You don't have to be just fixed to your Coinbase wallet, right? You can use any wallet. You can go anywhere to get an exchange, right? You have many different ways, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot more powerful because yes, I could have done this with my Coinbase wallet, but I would have stuck using my Coinbase wallet.
Right. And this is like a testing platform, so you're not spending your actual Coinbase.
Exactly. Right. And
that's incredible. I haven't heard of this.
Oh, you haven't?
Not really.
Yeah. When I saw it, I was like, wow, this is very cool.
This is brilliant.
So so then let's see. So I did. So I need to just send the transaction out. And so here, what you can see is I have a token at the end, and that's the token that allows me to send the transaction. So I get X many, free tokens. But let's hopefully this thing will work. Let me see this transaction hash. So that's the transaction. And yep, so you see this just happened.
Amazing.
So what's cool now is you see, okay, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but there's this 99.88% confidence factor, which means there's a very, very high likelihood that this transaction will be confirmed. And so for Bitcoin users and Bitcoin companies, they can give their customer the experience of an instant transaction because now they know, all right, it's almost confirmed. So I will give my customer the product, the credit, whatever it is, and then I can wait patiently for this thing to confirm. But this is again a way of seeing, what inputs are consumed, what outputs have been created, and right now, what's exciting is I check the transaction. I'm my own bank, right? And I do this for the different. So this is for an application testing it, but I also do this live. I mean, if I'm sending, Dash or Litecoin or Bitcoin, whatever I'm doing, I can do that around the world because all I have to change are a few letters over here. So instead of BCY test, I change it to BTC main or LTC main or Dash main.
Wow.
So yeah, so that makes it really easy. And what's fun about this is now, like I had money in my Bittrex account and I wanted to send someplace else, I didn't have to do it out of my Bittrex wallet. I could just, do it directly.
That's amazing.
It just feels great. You're not relying on anybody else.
And if you were to do it through Coinbase, you're not dealing with Coinbase fees.
Yeah, and you don't have to deal with Coinbase fees, right?
Could you put into Coinbase without? Well, I guess it's going from your fiat.
Yeah, so the thing with Coinbase is it's the easiest way to get money out of your bank account into a crypto, and then it probably is the easiest way to do that right now. But
I hate Coinbase.
it's a centralized exchange, so
it's
you know. So there are customers. They tell me bad things.
We love Coinbase.
Yeah. But I totally get what you're saying. There's a lot of issues. I mean, they charge very high fees, and I remember. Yes, every time they charge.
It hurts me. It hurts me so much. Yes.
But that's really fun. Yeah. So any of you who have a company, a blockchain startup, a cryptocurrency startup, it's what I showed you was really easy to do. And then this is a good example. I was, and so what I love about it is that I'm not a daily coder, but you know, I can do this myself. So at this point, I was just going to, just to wrap up a little bit. So what I was explaining there is, you know, just to summarize, BlockCypher gives you the power to access multiple blockchains because we have this HTTP layer here, which allows you to use the same type of APIs, but just switch a few letters in between so that you can make the API call that you want to the blockchain you want. So what that means is you can now have one application that supports multiple blockchains. And the reason why that's very powerful is because what we're finding is that blockchains have technology and they have features that are better suited for certain use cases than others. Like Ethereum has smart contracts, which differentiates them. Bitcoin is a store of value. Litecoin and Dash are better for faster, smaller payments. And then you have a whole bunch of privacy coins, right, that are for those who want to have, you know, very private transactions. So depending on your use case, you want to use a different blockchain. And even within a single application use case, you may use different blockchains. So I'll give you an example. We're working with the U.S. Department of Energy on a project to execute peer-to-peer energy transactions on the blockchain. So, and this is something I shall take Palo Alto as an example. So Palo Alto is like the Tesla capital of the world. There are a lot of people here who have Teslas and who need to charge their Teslas every night. The problem is that can be extremely draining on the grid. So wouldn't it be better if, let's say, you know, our neighbor here, let's say we have a bunch of Teslas, let's say we all have a Tesla. It's nice to dream. We each have a Tesla, and our neighbor has a solar panel. So we want to be able to get that excess energy, right, for our charging our Teslas, and that neighbor wants us to sell that energy so they can make some money off of their solar panel. So what this project is doing is enabling that kind of transaction to happen. Now, in order for us to set up this transaction, we need to set up a contract. So to set up that contract, we would use, you know, Ethereum and a smart contract to set up that contract. And then once we set up the contract, it basically says, okay, you're going to, so let's say the neighbor is going to sell us energy at a specific rate. And then we will pay that rate, and if we don't, then, you know, the supply is cut off. Or this energy rate is only going to apply for a certain period of time, right? So anyway, there's rules around this contract, and so it makes a lot of sense to use Ethereum and to use a smart contract to set up those rules. But when it comes to actually paying out, Ethereum is not necessarily the best network for doing payments because it's slow. It's slower, definitely, than Litecoin and Dash. And so then when you actually come to make the payment, you want to switch to another blockchain. And that's why we use Dash or use Litecoin. And so that's something that we're showing in an application. And as an example, why within a single sort of use case, you'd have multiple applications that you're using. And for that reason, using BlockCypher to handle this makes a lot of sense. To be able to switch between the applications, switch between the blockchains, that makes sense for that particular problem we're trying to solve. So I just want to end up with tokenization and some thoughts here, and then we can go into the questions that you guys have. So in terms of anybody who's interested in doing an ICO, and this applies to anybody around the world, we've had a lot of companies use our Ethereum APIs to do ICOs, mainly to accept payments. I don't think you can do that in the US anymore, but people are still doing them around the world. And then you can use our contract API to interact with the contracts, the token contracts. So this, our APIs here have been used for a lot of the ICOs, but also just in general for applications where they need smart contracts. And there's obviously some benefits and drawbacks of tokenizing. I would definitely say, regulatory concerns and issues are something we all have to be aware of, and I think in the last 6 months or so, it's been more challenging than it has been, previously. But what I really do like about tokenization and what people are doing with this technology is that the traditional VCs, the traditional venture capitalists, around this area, not too far from us, are now having to be really a lot better at what they do, because they just can't say, here, we have money and that's why you should talk to us. No, they have to say, we have the expertise, we can do these introductions, it's not just the money, and that changes a ton of things. And so that aspect I really like, that whole democratization of how you get money is a big deal, and I think that's one of the benefits, of being able to tokenize and some of these newer developments. So at this point, I just want to say, happy to have you reach out to me at any time. This is my Twitter handle. You can also reach out to me at BlockCypher. I'm just Karen BlockCypher, and I'm happy to talk to you about different use cases, and also just bounce, if you want to bounce ideas off of me in terms of how your blockchain startup should work, or things you should be looking for. I'm happy to brainstorm with you and talk to that. So yeah,
amazing, Karen, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Oh my gosh. My first question, I have a few, but BlockCypher doesn't necessarily, for a moment I thought, before I'd really met you today, I thought that BlockCypher kind of built the back end of some of the blockchain structures for companies to lay on, for their ideologies to work, but it's more changing so that you can kind of utilize different blockchains and then utilize different currencies.
Yeah.
Which I haven't seen done. Do you have any competitors in this space?
Well,
I feel like I can't even.
So they've all kind of pivoted and changed. So there was a company called Chain that did something similar to what we did, but only for Bitcoin about 4 years ago. And then they pivoted and they focused on permission chains for a while. And I think they came back out with some public offering. Then there are some Ethereum specific companies that do this just for Ethereum. They have APIs just for Ethereum. So there are companies who focus on one blockchain or another.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anyone else that focuses on as many blockchains as we do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Ruby, I know that you have a question that I want you to ask about so for example, Coinbase, because Coinbase is dealing with how many different crypto assets?
Yeah, so
6 or something.
Right.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember now.
So specifically, as a client of yours, how do you interact with Coinbase?
Yeah, so Coinbase uses us for our confidence factor. So it was this
Okay.
thing here where you can see, oops, let me go back.
And how that's occurring? Like how big is the blockchain that you guys are operating on?
Oh, so we
like 51% ownership of one that's like verifying the others.
Oh,
and
yeah,
like
yeah.
how big is that?
Right. So yeah, so at any given time, we're connected to at least 10% of the network. And so you can think of a typical, like, most developers that are just starting off will connect to maybe 1 or 2 nodes.
Wow. Wow.
And that's it. And so
Yeah.
we're to connect, to hundreds of thousands. If you think of how many nodes are up for the blockchain, the Bitcoin plus Ethereum plus Dash and so forth. So at least at any given time, at least 10%. So that's why we have this ability to get all this data. That's really useful in the market, and then use that data, to inform people about their transactions, inform them of fraud, which is why the confidence factor is so important. So the confidence factor is really about identifying if they're double spends, and a lot of companies have tried to come up with their own algorithms to identify double spends to figure out if a transaction will get confirmed. And it's because we're connected to so many nodes at any given time, and because of all the data that we're capturing, that's not just on the blockchain, but we capture all the data around transactions that have not been confirmed. And there's a reason why they haven't been confirmed. So with that information, we're able to then figure out, ascertain, well, is a transaction being propagated in a natural way? Meaning somebody's trying to hide their tracks. They're trying to say, oh, the transaction came from this node, but actually it came from another node. Why are they doing that? So we can identify when those weird things happen, and then
in terms of double spends, isn't that kind of the nature of the blockchains that prevents that? Right. So how would that happen?
Yeah. So if someone is identified if an attempt.
Okay.
Double spend. And so if there is an attempt, right, for that, then the transaction will not get confirmed. So that's why our confidence factor is just checking for that and making sure that. So if there's a high probability that the transaction, so if the confidence factor is very high, I mean it's 99.99%, that means most likely there will be no double spends, meaning the transaction will get confirmed. So so Coinbase and a bunch of others start off using us for a confidence factor, and they continue to do that because, especially last year, there were times where it was like 24 hours or longer to wait for a Bitcoin transaction to get confirmed. I mean, it was just monstrous. So I think it's better now.
People were freaking out.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's newer technologies to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
In the future, but. Right now, I mean, that confidence factor is what makes it easy for people to present this instant transaction.
So it's like an instant gratification.
Yeah.
Like I bought, yes, it's there, but it's coming still.
Right.
But it's going to happen.
Right.
Through that confidence.
Right.
And I'm thinking like confidence intervals, econ, like, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's the confidence, very confident it's coming. So you might have to wait for the actual transaction confirmed, but if you're a merchant, you can say to your end user, okay, you can have this trade right now, or you can have this product right now, or whatever it is that you're selling. So to the merchant, it gives that they're able to give the end consumer that instant gratification, which we all expect, right? So we all expect everything instant.
So we want to bring it back a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back to the real. I'm living my life.
Yes.
We're living our lives, and we really love crypto and blockchain, but how is it relevant to me? If I maybe have some Ethereum, Diana has some Ethereum, but Diana isn't a blockchain backend genius, and neither am I, and how does it how are we going to see the blockchain really take advantage and take a hold of us
Right.
in the coming years? So everyone's like, blockchain is the word.
So if you look at any network, the network has value when people adopt it and more people adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the phase right now where some have adopted it, but not all. And so we need to get to that phase for it to be, completely ubiquitous and really useful for all of us. I mean, you can think of it like the internet, right? In the beginning, when there were few people who used the internet, yes, it was useful for those few people who are on, but now that there's everyone on it, it is extremely useful for all of us. So as we get there, as we, move towards that vision, right? There are things that are naturally happening, like speculation. So we talked about this earlier, like a lot of people have purchased it, they hold it in the hopes that the value will grow. And that makes sense, especially for coins like Bitcoin and wherever they have a fixed supply, right? Because that's
Right.
inherent. But there are other coins where you don't have that kind of structure, or they just don't have the same setup where it's the value is only in the coin itself, right? There are coins that are coming out where the value is in the utility of the coin, which I believe long term is really what makes sense. And I think a lot of people believe this too, right? It just using tokens as an alternative to cash or to any kind of government backed currency makes a lot of sense, because you have an independent way of exchanging value and you don't have these intermediaries. So we're working with a number of foundations to get this adoption. And so some of this adoption will be, we'll start off in areas where we don't expect it. In terms of they're not related to speculation, which is what I think most people hear about. But there are areas which make a lot of sense in terms of the use case, right? So one of them is, we talked about peer-to-peer energy transactions on the blockchain. If you look at distributed energy resources around the world, most of us would probably say that's a great idea. It makes a lot of sense. We shouldn't be, mining coal, in spite of what our president says about climate control, right? Or the climate change, changing climate conditions. We are, ruining the world that we live in, right? By using up all the natural energy resources. So if we use distributed energy, if we're able to harness, whether it's solar power, wind power, that will help us all, in the long run. But to be totally honest, people are coin operated, right? And if there isn't an incentive for them to harness this solar power, wind power, they won't do it. In the Bay Area, we're kind of lucky. We have a lot of people here who believe in these things and technology and want to do these sorts of forward-looking things. But not everywhere else in the world is like that. And plus, it's not as sustainable, it doesn't catch on as much unless there is some incentive to do that. So that's why I believe that energy, distributed energy resources, and using blockchain to incentivize people to use distributed energy resources is a really important use case and a good one. And it makes a lot of sense in the long run, because that's how you get people to use things, because you're incentivizing them with making money, and we all want money, right? It's very clear there. And then another area that we've been working on is healthcare. And, so we all are lucky in that we live in the US or live in, other countries, Japan or otherwise, that have very well established healthcare systems. But insurance is still a pain. And last year, as an example, last year my husband broke his shoulder, and we went to the Kaiser, because we have Kaiser, we went to the hospital, in the emergency room to get him checked out, and he had 4 different line items on the bill that I got back. One was for the tech that saw him outside the emergency room. One was for the tech that was taking his x-rays. One was for the expert, that was supposedly knew about shoulder breaks or something like that. I mean, there's just all these different items, and it was so complicated that I actually had to spend, I think, 20 minutes with Kaiser trying to understand what this bill was about.
Yeah.
And who's paying who, and what I owed, and and that was just this one little incident. I mean, there are people in the healthcare industry that they have degrees in managing bills and payments, and it's very complicated. And you can say, yes, there's a reason for all of that, but then at the end of the day, when it's complicated, that means it costs more money for people to maintain it, to maintain the rules, to maintain the systems, and data's all over the place. It doesn't, it's not interoperable. And so billions are wasted, on these kinds of things in healthcare. Now with the blockchain, and I've spent a lot of time with some doctors and healthcare providers. The blockchain, you can cut through a lot of that. Not all of it, but you can cut through a lot of that. And you don't have to say, all right, I have this data here and this data here, and they don't make sense, and now I have to add somebody in the middle to make sense of the two pieces of data. The blockchain is a way of saying, here, this is the data. I, as a patient, have control over my data. And when I go to the hospital, I bring it with me, right? And if I move from New York or Japan or Nigeria, right, I don't need to send an army of doctors along with me. I don't have to take 100 tests again here to validate that I have certain conditions, right? I have this information with me at all times. And so that's going to save, a lot of money. And another example is I have a friend who was born in Vietnam. He was an orphan born there. He contracted some condition in his eye, and it went dormant until he was in his 20s, and he was living in New York at the time. He went to a hospital there, and they said, oh, you have this condition. And he then moved here to San Francisco, didn't have that problem for another 20 years, and then had the problem again. And at this point, he said, wait, I think I had this problem before. So he contacted that hospital in New York where he had the condition the first time. That hospital in New York had shut down. So there were no more files. And so he had to take, so he had this condition, and it was in his eye, and it was progressing rapidly. And so within a week, he had to go through this battery of tests, right? Because they didn't know what he was, and they couldn't verify. So they go to the battery of tests, and within that week, he almost went blind because it took so long for them to figure it out. Luckily, he didn't go blind, but he said from then on, I carry around with me this massive stack of papers.
He could have had it just.
And because I don't want to go through this battery of tests again. I'm going to go blind the next time. And and this is the kind of reason, it's these kinds of examples where you think, okay, there's got to be a better way. And so there's a company we're working with that has an application where you can store this information on. You have ownership of it. It's authenticated by physicians, and it's all clear who authenticated it and all their credentials, so it's not fake. And then you own it, right? And you can carry that around with you because authenticate that patient coming in. And it was because the hospital had been attacked by a hacker who stole all the customer information, so they couldn't admit that patient. So they had to turn away patients because they just couldn't verify that they were their patients. And it was just, that's life or death. So very weird situation. But so I think it'll be a combination, to answer the long answer to your question, it'll be a combination of some very simple things like, okay, how do we make it easier for people who are speculating, who are investing, who want to start using cryptocurrencies to get started. And then there'll be these other use cases that people are working on where